You don't seem ready, but
Ready.
there he is. Tim Tebow arriving to Jacksonville Jaguars practice. More on that in a second. You're probably wondering where we are. Hi, I'm John, and this is
Peyton.
Church Without Walls. And if you've followed the show for any length of time, you know that I look for any excuse to bring football in as a topic, and I'm just going to talk about that lightly today to show you a little bit about how the world sees the church these days. And for that discussion, I'm going to employ the athlete Tim Tebow and the athlete Simone Biles. This and more on Church Without Walls. So, we are glad you can join us today. For the moment, we have Peyton Cam working. Looks like you're working with chalk. Is that right?
I think so.
Peyton's working with chalk this morning, and I'm going to just talk. We kind of shoot from the lip here on Church Without Walls, but something happened over the past week I thought was fascinating and probably worthy to talk about, to make a point to people who might be so close to the church they don't see how the world sees it. You know, kind of like the wife who puts on the dress and then asks her husband, how do I look in this dress? And you have to be very diplomatic in how you answer that sometimes, gents, but this is how the church is sometimes. We don't recognize that maybe we've put on a few pounds over the last few decades, and we don't look at ourselves in a mirror much. We see ourselves differently than the world does. And recently, you're seeing number 85 there, Tim Tebow, at 33, has signed a contract with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And this video, you're probably wondering, what do you mean video? It is a video, but you're not seeing it play. This video of Tim Tebow walking into the Jaguars facility for practice got hundreds and thousands of views and attention on all the sports channels and all that. And you might be wondering why. I mean, it's a 33-year-old guy walking into practice, and a number of people have commented that he's not going to make the team, or if he does, he's going to be the fourth-string tight end on the Jacksonville Jaguars, who, by the way, had a first-round pick. They drafted a fellow who's pretty impressive, and yet all the coverage is on Tebow right now. And people are wondering, you know, why is this happening? Well, you might not know this, but within hours, the number one selling jersey in the NFL became Tim Tebow's. And for a guy who might not make it into the league this year, or who might not even start for a team this year, might say, what is going on here? What's the phenomenon here? What's so special about Tebow? And the answer is he's a Christian. And you say, well, wait a minute, aren't there thousands of Christians in the NFL? Yeah, there are, and lots of Christians in sports, but he's more known for it than others because you all know he'd do the famous kneel and pray after he'd score a touchdown. And somehow he got connected with modern Churchianity more so than other athletes who are more quiet about their faith. And he also is a symbol, I believe, of the persecuted Christians complex, right? Where evangelical Christians think they're persecuted and people want them to fail and they don't want them to succeed and all these other things. So a bunch of, I guarantee you, it was all Christians who bought this jersey. It wasn't just Florida Gator fans or people who think Tim Tebow is cute. It's mostly Christians, fathers probably buying their shirts for the sons, the jerseys for their sons, and probably whole youth groups buying this. And how does the world react to this? Well, to set this up, I want to show you another video. This one is of the gymnast, Simone Biles, and she just pulled off something that's never been done before by anybody in the world.
How much have you guys thought
and
about
I'm gonna mute it for right now, and you could watch it as it's going on. But I can't even name this move. This move it's like a double pike Yurchenko or something. I can't even. She lands the Yurchenko double pike vault at the U.S. Classic, and you watch it, and it's truly amazing. It's unbelievable, and yet it got less attention in the sports world than a 33-year-old minor league baseball player coming into the NFL for a tryout. And you say, well, maybe that's because football's more popular than gymnastics, or maybe that's because people are racist and it's a white guy and a black athlete, and that's why it got more attention. And you know, the truth is, I don't think it's any of that. I think if Simone Biles, she's probably the most incredible gymnast of our lifetime, but I think if after every move like this, that she sticks the landing, if she pointed to the sky and made the sign of a cross and knelt down like Tebow does, I think she'd be as popular in the Christian world as the pasty white Tim Tebow is. And I just think it has something to do with this idea of Christian identity and how it's tied to sports and celebrity and so forth. And I got to be honest with you folks, I don't think the world looks at it the same we do. I know people have been commenting about Tebow and how that there's players on the Jaguars that are going to resent the attention he gets because it's not deserved. And if we're talking about something deserved here, here's a gymnast who pulled off something no one has ever done before. And it's overshadowed a bit by a guy walking into a preseason practice. And the Christian world's reaction to it. So, you know, what can we learn from this? I think there's a lot of eye rolling going around. People outside the church, a lot of guffawing, a lot of bewilderment, a lot of people saying WTF or what have you. And Christians, of course, will hear that reaction, and they'll, who are the ones who already have a persecution complex, will just say, "See, they hate my Jesus." And no, it's not that. It's the first string and the second string and the third string tight end who don't have a camera thrust in their face when they walk into practice. And if I can give you an example of something similar to this, but in a different way, it's when Michael Jordan quit basketball and he went into baseball. And all of a sudden, you had all this attention on minor league baseball that had never happened before, right? It just no one really cared about minor league baseball to the extent they did when Michael Jordan was playing on these backward cities teams, and newscasts would follow him around, and he'd get all this attention. And there's no doubt that there are some people who probably played with him or played against him in the minor leagues that spent their whole lives working for this break, and they weren't getting attention, even though they had better stats than Michael Jordan, even though they probably make it to the big show and Jordan wouldn't, and they didn't get a 10th or a 100th or a 1,000th of the attention Jordan got. And some thought that was unfair. And if you look at it to that degree, it was. But let's face it, Michael Jordan was the greatest basketball player in the world, and so he had that identity following him. And whether he was playing baseball or playing badminton, he would have had some of that attention following him. And Tebow doesn't have that. Tebow is a great athlete, especially in college, but he's not Michael Jordan. He's a Christian. And so when people look at this and they're confused about it, and they're like, why is his jersey the number one selling jersey when he's been out of the league for a decade, and when he hasn't really had the accomplishment that many others have had in the league? People say, well, it's all the Christians. All the Christians are celebrating him. He's become a symbol for them and so forth. And some people think it's good for the church. It shines attention on the church in a way. I don't think it's actually helping the cause of presenting the gospel. I don't think in the long run that people actually say, wow, I'm interested in Jesus now. This is fascinating. I think it's a phenomenon that the outside world looks at and rolls their eyes and maybe face palms and says, why are these people so odd? Why are they so weird? Why does this seem disjointed? Now, why is this important on a Sunday morning? Why do I bring this up? Just this phenomenon. And it's just because I think it represents a greater difficulty or challenge for the Christian church today, in that we're caught up in all kinds of things that are a distraction from the true gospel, from truly representing Jesus as fundamentally different and revolutionary than anything else. That the message of Christianity about a suffering servant, about a God becoming a man because he loved the lost sheep so much he'd be willing, as a great shepherd, to give his life to secure the safety of that lost sheep. I think that message is completely lost when we get into celebrity wars, and our guy is more popular than your guy, and Christians are better athletes, or this whole idea of, I was talking to my wife earlier about this whole idea that we should support Christian businesses and as much as we could, and this whole world of Christendom that continues to isolate itself and separate itself from the world, but not in a positive way, in a way that is catty and petty and like you're watching Mean Girls or something like that. It becomes a cloistered group. It becomes something that is off-putting to those who aren't in it, as much as, like, say, the caricature of a mean fraternity or sorority is off-putting, or the popular kids in junior high are off-putting to the rest of us. It's this kind of attitude that's, quite frankly, completely the polar opposite of what the early church was, and what, for example, the writers of the New Testament say about discipleship. When they talk about discipleship, Paul uses the word that we are the off-scouring of the world, right? That's not popular today, to think about the off-scouring. Think of a frying pan that's just got a bunch of gunk in the bottom of it, and you have to take the steel wool and the scraper to scrape out the junk. And Paul's saying that's us on the bottom of that frying pan. Paul is saying that the foolish things confound the wise, but he's not promoting foolishness or folly, right? He's talking about perception there. He's talking about certain people's perception there. But sometimes Christians get caught up in popularity contests and this idea that my dad's stronger than your dad and so forth. And you see this with Christian nationalism and other things that have taken hold, especially in the Western church, and this idea in Christian doctrine that if you come to Christ, everything gets fixed. I mean, your teeth straighten and get whiter. You start to grow hair. Your marriage is better. Your business will expand. Your relationship with your children will go from alienated to flourishing. All this kind of nonsense that you've seen being sold on late night infomercials has infiltrated the Christian church. And just like the people selling, the Ponzi scheme essential oils don't realize how much of a nuisance they are. They don't realize how off-putting they are to their friends and neighbors and family, and how people start crossing the street when they see them coming because you want to sell them vitamins or, makeup or essential oils. Just as that person who's caught up, right, in the enthusiasm of that multi-tiered marketing scheme don't realize that they look fat in that dress. The Christian church has fallen into this rabbit hole. And if we're going to rescue the gospel message from the clown car that has become modern Christianity, if we're going to stem the bleeding of our young people looking at the church and evaluating it and saying, yeah, we'll pass, we're going to pass on it, and we're going to go over here and sit under the influence of people that we respect, that have more authenticity in there, more genuine in their message, that we'd rather put ourselves under maybe the influence of Joe Rogan or of Jordan Peterson or of the intellectual dark web or or of a TED Talk than go to youth group or sit for a 40-minute message under this kind of really second-rate Tony Robbins kind of message, and believing that's no disparagement to Tony Robbins. I think he's got some valuable things to say. Now, before you think that I'm just beating up on the church, I'm part of the church. I am the fat lady in the dress. I have the tear in my stocking. I realize that the church, if you look at it as an orgasm, that was Freudian, an organism. Peyton's laughing. You can't see her. If you look at the church as an organism that's different, that's captured in each generation in like a still picture, and sometimes looks beautiful and sometimes looks comical and sometimes looks well together, like maybe a beautiful picture of Princess Diana, and sometimes looks like a schizophrenic wretch like Kathy Griffin doing some kind of a comedy routine. Yes, the church is all of that. And so people who defend the church, period, don't understand that the church has been ugly in period. So there's nothing to defend in Voltaire's day about the true church of his day. They were murderous, they were incestuous, they were vile, they were something that if they were Israel under the God of the Old Testament, God would have said, the world curses me because of you. They would have been a church that Paul would have rebuked by letter and word had he written to them directly. This has been a cycle throughout church history. And even now when we speak of the Christian church, we kind of speak to it in our own region. Because the Christian church in America is different than the Christian church in the UK, is different than the Christian church in Kenya or in China or in places of persecution. Now, we speak of it as one organism, right? One body of Christ. And yet we understand that sometimes, the hand can never say to the eye, I have no need of you, but that's not to say that there's no reason to criticize the eye or the hand, right? That's not to say that we are the perfect bridegroom as Christ is. And sometimes the church or the bride obscures the view of the bridegroom. And I know that's not a great analogy. It sounds very complementarian in an egalitarian age. I know that's not a great analogy, but when the focal point should be Jesus, because Jesus is the infallible Word of God, when the focal point should be what Jesus accomplished, what he spoke, and what he did, instead of what the church did in the Crusades or in the Inquisitions or in Harvest Bible Chapel or in Willow Creek or in the Vatican or what have you, then we're silly to defend the bride when she came into the party drunk and vile. And that takes the conversation off the bridegroom. Now, I was going to get to some passage in Genesis today, but I don't know if I'm going to have time. It would be an odd transition. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Bible, but when we're speaking of the church today and apologetics, we've gotten caught up in something. I think I'm going to go in a different direction. Then we'll come to Genesis 1 next week. I think I want to take you in a different direction and talk to you about something that popped up in my C.S. Lewis group that I'm a member in this morning. And a fellow member shared, I will try and bring this in. A fellow member shared a quote of Lewis, and I'm bringing it in right now, so I'm a little bit distracted, but stay with me. Lewis had this wonderful quote from Mere Christianity about the purpose of the church, and this kind of fits in with my discussion today, so let's bring it in. And this was the quote. The church exists for no other reason. The church exists for nothing else but to draw people, men, he's using it in a generic way, men, women, and children, but to draw men into Christ, to make them little Christs. Now, this was informed and inspired by something Blaise Pascal had written, obviously, and something George MacDonald had said before. But in Mere Christianity, Lewis makes this point. The church exists for nothing else but to draw men into Christ and to make them little Christs. Now, you might say that the church exists for more than that, but I think he's talking about the fundamental purpose of the church is that. Now, some people said that is, the ideal case, but too bad, we haven't lived up to it. Neil says, too bad that's usually not the case. Now, I think he's reflecting on the church that we're talking about. The modern Western church certainly is not doing that. And then I added my comment, which was, and as apologetics and the church have forsaken mere Christianity and the imagination for an enlightenment bewitched epistemology and Christianity plus nationalism, the church has driven many away from Christ. And somewhere, Screwtape is raising a glass to a group of very satisfied devils. Kristen, a fellow member, commented after my quote, and she said, yes, John, add in the subtle heresy of gender hierarchy, and the demons are having a party. I just wrote to family yesterday that Satan is not so obvious with his deception as simply wars and rumors of wars and calls for peace to signal, quote, unquote, the end. War and peace have been continuous forever, but when it comes to nationalism and Christianized sexism and rapture ideology and uncritical support of building another physical temple, now we fit right into Screwtape's playbook. One of the things that Lewis wrote about in the Screwtape letters, his imaginary letters between two demons coaching each other, senior demon coaching a junior demon on how to distract his patient, his Christian, from mere Christianity. These letters carried many things in it, but one of the bits of advice from senior demon to junior demon is to make the patient accept or feel that it's relevant to accept Christianity plus. Now, he wrote the Screwtape letters during World War II. And so a big topic within Christendom was this idea of patriotism or pacifism. Patriotism or pacifism. What is a Christian to do in light of such evil and then the challenge of the Axis versus the Allies in World War II? And so, Lewis also wrote about that. But the idea in the Christian world, if you're on one side or the other than that, is that, well, my side, if I'm the Christian patriot, my side is the God-ordained side, and the people who are pacifists really aren't Bible-believing Christians. And the other side can make the same argument. Well, if you truly want to follow Jesus, then you can't possibly accept violence in any sort, even if you try and justify it. And so people who don't accept this view really aren't true Christians. And so this idea of this binary where you're judging another's servant. And Lewis saw the foolishness of that and the folly in that, and he even saw it as demonic. And so he has his senior demon influencing the junior demon to don't worry about which side this guy picks. If he picks the patriot side or the pacifist side, either road he chooses can be useful in our means as long as he's choosing Christianity plus something. Christianity plus patriotism. If he does that, then because you can't serve two masters, the plus will always overshadow the Christianity part, the Christ part. I know nothing among you except for Christ and him crucified. All of a sudden, your arguments for patriotism will take a higher level of prominence in your worldview, and you believe you will be actually fighting for the gospel when you're making your patriotic arguments or your pacifistic arguments. And Lewis saw that this was a demonic thing to add to the gospel. Christianity plus is actually Christianity minus. You're actually gutting the gospel when you add something to it that might be a good thing, but is contrary to the necessary nature and exclusivity of the importance and the fundamental relationship of the good news to a world in desperate need of it, right? You're adding arsenic to the baby's formula, even if it's something that you think is a good thing. It might be family, or it might be capitalism, or it might be the First Amendment or the Second Amendment, and people add all kinds of things to the gospel. They pack it in, and in some ways these things have become an obstacle to the world that looks outside and says, that doesn't seem like Jesus. When Gandhi looks at Christians and he says, your Jesus impresses me. Who couldn't be impressed by this story? But why are your Christians so different from the Jesus that they proclaim? And I'm not picking on Tim Tebow. I love Tim Tebow. I wish him the best. I think he kind of doesn't mind that he's been taken up as kind of this poster boy for the unembarrassed believer. I think he might think that he's doing the Lord's work in doing this. However, if you see the consequences of this, it's not very persuasive to people who aren't already wearing the Christian jersey. And I think it's a distraction to the gospel in the long run. I think it makes people, it fits the narrative of the Christian caricature of, the clown feet and the red nose. So, having said that, back to Lewis, the church exists for nothing else but to draw men into Christ and to make them little Christ. I guess you have a question to ask yourself. Does your church do that? Is your church doing that? Now, I'm not speaking of the church as a where and a when, but it might be a denomination in your view. It might be the Presbyterians or the Southern Baptists or whatever you consider yourself. I know that the church is not a where and a when, it's a who and a what, and it's not just an American element, but it's the followers of Christ all around the globe. And it's not even in this particular time, it's of all time. And so it's very difficult to wrap your mind around what the church is. But If you want to, if you want to reduce it to your church or your group of fellows, the communion you're in of followers of Christ, is your family doing it? Are you doing it? In word and thought and deed, because this is true discipleship, that in word and thought and deed we reflect not John Calvin, not Billy Graham, not Joel Osteen or whoever, Andy Stanley, not Les Feldick. Do we reflect Christ? And when I say that, I'm not talking about this version of Christ that you learned in Awana or Sunday school, but the actual Christ. The actual Christ. And this is a difficult question. This is something we constantly must be asking ourselves. Because in some ways the world will reject even the true reflection of Christ. But we don't want them to reject Christ because of a distorted reflection of a guy in a football jersey. Right? So, I've given you enough to chew on for this week. And again, I'm not trying to pick on Tebow or those of you who bought the jersey that is going to be in a Goodwill in 6 months because he didn't make the league or he retired after this year because he's already 33. But I'm not trying to pick on you if you're one of that, and I'm not trying to get you angry if you're a fan of Tebow and you bought the jersey. A lot of people have bought the jersey apparently, but you ever ask yourself why and what was behind the motivation there? Are you ready to share? Because I think I might be getting in more trouble than
I'm almost done.
Than using the word orgasm instead of organism on a Sunday morning. I think the closer we get to Lewis and his understanding of mere Christianity, if you look at it, you ask somebody who were the biggest influences for the gospel in the 20th century, there's only two names that ultimately come up, and it's Billy Graham and C.S. Lewis, although I think there are others that should be in that group, like Teresa of Calcutta and others. And then there's others that probably deserve to be in that group who just aren't as influential celebrity-wise. They weren't that well known. But when you think about the most known influencers for the gospel in the 20th century, it's Lewis and Graham, and I think Lewis has staying power. When the Billy Graham Crusades are long forgotten, people will still be reading and quoting Mere Christianity. They will still be coming to the cross because of Mere Christianity and because of the logical and imaginative arguments that Lewis made. And when I mentioned that apologetics today has gone down an enlightenment path, trying to prove God and make God, dance with science and equal science, and like a formula, like a mathematical formula that any idiot can see that there must be a God, and then you're going to bow to Jesus. I think that path has been a screw tape path. And I think the more we study what Lewis did to appeal to people, not in just a particular tribe of Christianity, but beyond Christianity, beyond all the 40,000 different, 40,000 different splinters of the oak, 40,000 little rooms in the long hallway of Christianity. I think not only did he appeal beyond the world of Christianity, he was persuasive to those outside of it. And that's really what we need to ask. Are we being persuasive in a world that wants, as Tolkien said, that wants that story? Every man wants that story to be true. The true gospel, not the false gospel, not the Christianity plus gospel, But we need to get back to that understanding of presenting Christ and Him crucified, and the suggestion that yes, we live in a just disjointed world, but there's something here. There's something about Christ that we need to consider, that we need to reflect on, that brings meaning out of what seems to be meaninglessness or purposelessness, that actually adds savor, that adds flavor, that takes us beyond the epistemologically provable world, and that taps into our imagination and our love of stories, that there's something more there than facts and figures and formulas, and that archaeology or biology or astronomy can prove, to people who, you see Peter Hitchens argue that he knows almost no serious intellectual atheists who have ever been moved by those arguments. But the ones he's seen that have moved, like Lewis himself, from unbelief to belief, have been moved by matters of the heart, by an appeal not to their intellect but to their heart. Now, their intellect wasn't an affront to them. It wasn't an embarrassment to overcome. But the appeal originally was that it's a story that every man wants to be true. That Pascal and Augustine and Lewis and others are right when they speak of a God-shaped vacuum, or a desire in the human heart, a longing to know our Father in a world where we seem exiled or abandoned or lost. A lost boy. All right, I'm completely done. And you literally did. Is that a unicorn or just a horse?
Unicorn. I'm adding the horn right now. The last touch.
Well, I can't have you show it without the horn.
I'm doing it right now.
Oh, look, your camera stayed with us today. The cord must be in a good position. You're adding the horn now. We're seeing Peyton Camp. Folks, I do appreciate you listening. And if this is meaningful to you, keep joining us with a bagel and a coffee. We are not a church. I don't even pretend to be a substitute for a church, but we are part of the church. We're the church without walls. So if you've been harmed by your relationship to the church and yet you're still attracted to Jesus, that's what Church Without Walls is for. We ask hard questions. We present intellectual challenges. We hopefully project hope in a world that seems to be lost or distracted or offended by a church that's really gone off the rails. And I say that with nothing but love in my heart for the hand and the eye that are a part of what we call the body of Christ. And Peyton's signing as we speak. All right. I think we're ready. Can I hold this up? Peyton had her first art show last night down in Casa Grande, Arizona. And Wendy and I went down, and, I bought a painting, but some other people, some people who went to the show, bought some of your handmade jewelry.
Yeah.
A bracelet and some earrings, which Peyton makes jewelry too. This is tough to do because I don't want to block your view. So Peyton's work today is a unicorn.
Yep.
With a rainbow. So it's a rainbow unicorn, which is...
And walking up a hill, and under the hill there's a big sea.
Oh, beyond the hill, there's a big city and we don't see it?
No, not a city, a sea.
Oh,
See
a
the
sea.
Water?
There's a sea beyond the hill. Yes. I see the sea and the rainbow and the unicorn and the love sign, the heart sign under your name, Peyton. Well, it's beautiful. I love this one.
Thank you.
What inspired it?
I wanted to draw a unicorn.
Yeah. Well, when you get the feeling, you get the feeling. Folks, thanks for watching. We'll see you next week. Next week, we're going to talk about Genesis 1 a little bit because it's a controversial passage in Scripture. We're going to talk about how to treat an ancient text and why it's led to so much confusion in our day. And part of this is the Enlightenment thinking that we mentioned earlier. So join us next week. We'll talk a little bit about Genesis, but thanks for joining us, folks. God bless you. Have a blessed week.